Welcome to the Sheff United Way. My name is Hal, and the 2023-24 accounts, the money, the financial side of things up to the end of June 2024 have been released. Accountant and Sheffield United fan Darren Smith will be reflecting and joining us now on what was a truly awful Premier League season. Darren, thank you so much for joining us again. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for the invite.
It's good to have you back. I think it's important that we get straight off the bat with this one. You know, when it comes to numbers, numbers can't really be impartial. They are just numbers, and we're going to talk about them in a way that hopefully will make sense to everyone. I'm not great at maths. I'm not great at numbers. You are. You're going to make sense of this to me, and we're going to start by focusing on a kind of overview, if you will, of what you've made of when you've actually read all this.
Well, obviously, it was a season that was absolutely horrendous for us as fans on the pitch. And in some ways, I think these numbers probably reflect why that was. And obviously, we'll come into that in more detail. In terms of the overview that the club themselves have given, they obviously recognise how poor it was on the pitch. But they saw this as being probably more of a season for the long term. There was a lot of long-term planning. Obviously, there was long-term planning in their eyes in terms of players that were signed. People like 𝗍𝗵𝗲 and Gus were brought in on long-term contracts. People like Sander and 𝗍𝗿𝗲, whose contracts were running down, left. So there was a recalibration really of the squad. But also there's a lot of work done off the field. We obviously know about the purchase of the 𝗣𝗿𝗿 facility, the land that was purchased at Bramall Lane, and obviously there was a lot of progress on reopening the hotel as well. So I think this was sort of a groundwork foundations as far as the club were concerned to get things right in the long term.
It felt when we got promotion like we absolutely had to get promotion. It felt like it was a really important time, even though when we got there, it was horrendous and it wasn't particularly enjoyable. And I've actually heard players talk about that. 𝗬𝗿𝗄𝗍𝗶𝗵 recently saying it was awful. It felt like we got beat every week. But what was promotion to the Premier League worth in terms of income?
Obviously, there's a lot of talk about the playoff game and it being worth 100 million, 150 million. For us, promotion was a necessity because actually our income is obviously still quite significant, even in the Championship, because we've been benefiting from parachute payments. So for us, there was obviously an uplift, but it was more modest than probably the headlines suggest. Our income was up by £73.9 million. And of that, £71 million was TV income. Now, that wasn't as great as the season we went up last time, because obviously we finished 9th, we were on the TV a lot more, and we also got bonuses for our league places. But it's still a significant increase on where we were as a Championship club. So the turnover last year was 138 million. And like I say, that was nearly 74 million pounds up on the previous season.
I suppose a question a lot of Blades fans will want the answer to is how much of that went on wages and overheads?
Well, this is probably where we start to look at why we probably didn't do as well on the pitch as we look like we've done off the pitch. For the year itself, we actually generated a profit of £16.7 million. Now, I don't know if people remember back, but we made a loss in the promotion season of about £31 million. And even the £16.7 million is a little bit deflated because there was a little bit of movement in terms of value in the properties. Now, fans don't really need to get involved in that. We're not going to sell Bramall Lane. We're not going to sell the training ground. So really, there were book entries. If you actually look at the day-to-day trading, we made a profit of £27 million. And fundamentally, when teams get promoted, they shouldn't really be making a profit. They should be reinvesting in their first season in transfer fees and wages. And the reason we made that profit was obviously to balance the books. We saw ultimately the issues that season before cost us. We're now suffering it with the -2 points. So there was a clear balance in the books. In terms of the wages, our cost went up 22 million on the Championship. That was predominantly wages. we had a wage bill of £64 million. Now that is really, really modest by Premier League standards. One of the factors that people look at in terms of investing in the Premier League is how much they spend on wages as a percentage of turnover. And the target for most clubs to be sustainable is to spend 70 to 75% of their turnover on wages. We finished the season spending 46% of our revenue on wages. Now, part of that will be we have a lot of contracts that are bonus related, and clearly we did so badly that none of those bonuses really came to fruition. So if we'd have stayed up, we'd have probably been at the higher end of the percentages, but nowhere near the 70%. And fundamentally, if you dive into the numbers, what we effectively did was we used the increase in income to pay for transfer fees and to increase the wages slightly. And we also invested in off the field assets. It was going to be a semi-miracle for us to stay up with that sort of wage, and obviously we saw what actually happened.
People will have their own ideas about why we went down, and there may be a couple of players that leap to mind, but of course, as you've just explained there, wages, you really struggle when you can't compete with other teams in the same league who will be offering more for players, even if on a free transfer. But what did we spend and what did we receive on transfers?
So I don't know if people can remember back. We actually made 8 permanent signings during that season. The most expensive one was obviously 𝗣𝗿𝗲𝗍, and then there was 𝗍𝗲𝗄𝐻, and then there was a whole smaller, modest signings. There was your Trusty, Tom Davis, Slimani, Traore, and 𝗍𝗿𝗲𝗍. The one that was I've been asked about already, obviously, is the Cameron Archer transfer. So in these accounts, we treated Cameron Archer as a permanent transfer. I know that there's talk about whether it was really a loan to buy, and a lot of the actual finances of this one and the admin of this one was actually driven by Aston Villa's need to actually show a profit on him rather than us. But from our point of view, we showed him as a permanent transfer. So with including Archer, we spent £52.6 million on transfer fees. Now, not all of those will have been spent in the summer. With a lot of transfers, a lot of the actual fees are deferred over the 2 or 3 years of a contract, and that will have been a case for these players as well. In terms of sales, obviously there were the 2 big ones. There was Sander and 𝗚𝗿𝗍, and the accounts show that we made a £19.4 million profit on those 2 players. Now, you need to bear in mind that obviously Sander cost us north of 20 million, and we didn't get anywhere near as much of that. But also, again, the way transfers are treated by football clubs is we spend 20 million on Sander, but we spread that over his 4 or 5 year contract. So by the time we sold him, he was probably only worth about £2 to £3 million in the books. So we made a profit on Sander and we made a profit on 𝗚𝗿𝗍. In terms of actual money in, we were probably looking at around, I think we were looking at about 26, 27 million pound without any of the add-ons. So it was sort of 52 million out, 27 million pounds in, but not necessarily all cash up front.
It's going to be interesting. Fans are going to listen to this and they're going to say, right, okay, so this actually sounds like, if you're looking at balance sheets, well, a lot of this sounds like the Blades did some things that they should have done. And then there's going to be other fans that are going to be like, well, what about the Nottingham Forest approach and looking at like speculating to accumulate it and that sort of thing. Before we get on to my next question, what is your thoughts on modern football and the way that clubs approach it? And I'll use Forest again as an example, because whilst they did sail very close to the wind, it does look like it's actually worked for them. And, is that going to be the way that teams that when they get promotion have to actually really go for it? Otherwise, nowadays with football, you just come straight back down.
I mean, personally, I think they do. I think you have to sort of throw the balance sheet out the window now and really go for it. And like Forest, you have to try and come fourth bottom, and then the finances will start to right themselves. But the problem we have is that we did that. We didn't necessarily do that in the first season we were in the Premier League, but we did it in the second season. And then all the legacy of that was we couldn't recover what we spent on players when we were relegated. So you need to spend big, but you also need to have that backdoor approach as well. If you go straight back down, have you signed the right players to sell them when other clubs know that you need to sell them? And that was clearly in our thoughts this time. We made no attempt really to take risky deals or to do short-term deals. They were all young players, they were development players, and the idea was that if it failed, we would get money back on them. I think if Forest had failed, they'd have really struggled to get their money back on them. But like I say, because they finished fourth bottom, they've then been able to move on. Ultimately, it depends on your owner putting money in over and above what the club earns, and if certain clubs have that backstop, they can do it. If other clubs like ourselves and Luton don't have that backstop, then unfortunately you're really taking a risk with the finances. And like I say, last season, the season before these accounts, we paid the price of that. We're now paying the price of that with the -2 points deduction.
Yeah, we might talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But there was a lot of off-the-field costs. New site at Door. You've already mentioned the hotel. So where did that leave us in terms of debt, finances at the end of the year?
Well, I mean, that was a key thing. We did spend quite a lot off the field, and you'd like to think that we come out of this season that we're talking about with actually a legacy of these seasons in the Premier League. Whereas before, the legacy was money owed to other clubs for transfer fees, and we did nothing really off the field. If you think back, we purchased the land around Bramall Lane off the former chairman. We did quite a lot of Shirecliff upgrades, and then obviously the key one was the purchase of the Door site. That's disclosed as costing £3 million in the accounts. Now, obviously, there's going to be a lot of money spent on that in terms of development, so that might well be another 4 or 5 million that's coming down the line. And then there was the hotel, and I think you can see in the accounts that the hotel has cost a lot more than we expected to reopen it, and there was still it was about 80% complete when these accounts were finalised. But overall, there was a spend of about £12 million on off the field and facilities. So I think there's an element of some fans will say, well, we could have spent £12 million on the field. It goes back to your Forest. Would that have really made a difference to whether we'd have stayed up? I think on balance, I don't think 12 million would have done. But 12 million on a new academy and 12 million on the hotel should make a big difference to incomes going forward. In terms of where that leaves us, I'm going to give you quite a scary number, but hopefully I can explain it to show that it's not as scary as it was. When we were relegated last time, we owed nearly £100 million in transfer fees. We'd sort of signed players on the never never. This time we go down with a debt of £120 million. Now we owe the bank £33 million, a lot of which is due over 1 year. So effectively, that you can treat that as a mortgage on these facilities and on the ground. We owed Macquarie, who are I suppose the vulture funds that basically allow us to sell players that we don't get the money for up front, but we actually sort of accelerate that money. We owed them £18 million. We owed the owner, Prince Abdullah, £28 million, and we owed on player transfers nearly £40 million. So on the face of it, it sounds like we didn't actually improve our situation compared to when we came down last time. I think the key thing though is the player one. That the £40 million that we owed on players includes the Cameron Archer figure, which was actually cancelled. As soon as June finished, it was cancelled. So you're talking about 14-15 million already paid back there. Prince Abdullah's was a soft loan. If he'd have not sold the club, we wouldn't have tried to recover that. So that again is not really an issue. The Macquarie loan was on advances that we got for the Sanderberg and Illy fees. So they will have only paid probably 25%, maybe 30% up front. But the good thing about those is because they were then resold, they'll have then been paid to us in full, and we'll have paid back Macquarie. So a lot of the loans that were sat there on the 30th of June were probably not sat there on the 1st of August. So we were actually in a position where, in terms of monies due back into us, was clearing a lot of the loan. we're effectively coming into this season with probably a little bit of money outstanding on the Gus transfer, a little bit of money on the 𝗍𝗍 transfer, and then a bank loan that's covering a lot of the assets that we've purchased. So for a normal business, you'd probably say that's still quite a big debt. For a football business, it's virtually nothing.
It's quite scary in itself. There's going to be people who said, well, I've been listening to this and I haven't heard two key words. And for many United fans, they're not their favourite two words. Shall we talk about United World and what, if anything, you were able to divulge about United World?
Well, the United World figure has been sort of discussed every year, hasn't it? I mean, and basically, what do United World do? I think the easiest way to look at it is that there are members of the board, there are members that do executive roles for Sheffield United that are not employed by Sheffield United. There's the chairman, there's the directors, there's people who within recruitment, there's people doing marketing for us to bring sponsors in and things like that. So it's basically wages to cover those guys and to cover some bits of software. In the season we're talking about, the amount we paid out to United World was 3.8 million, which was slightly up on the year before, which was 2.7 million. Probably again, there was a bit more in terms of cost, in terms of what we have to do as a Premier League club and how many people we bring in from United World to help us. But you either understand the concept of United World or you don't by now. And to be honest, it's history.
Well, what's your opinion? What will be the legacy of United World?
I mean, the intention of United World was clearly to have a collection of players to give a pathway from the smaller clubs through to the top club. We were the top club of the pyramid. Even the club that was held in the Middle East was with a view to bringing players in that you could bring in at a younger age than you're allowed to under European rules. Then 𝗍𝗍 was bought because Belgium has a lax approach to passports and staying within the EU. So the whole club group was really genuinely geared towards Sheffield United. But I think ultimately you'd have to say it's been a failure because, one, the project's probably not gone on long enough, and two, the only real example of a player that did this was 𝗍𝗶𝗴, and basically injuries killed that deal. So I think it was done with the right reasons. I think there's probably been more success on the sponsorship side and making the name of the club. But I just think that United World itself was probably underfunded by the end, in the same way that the club was a little bit underfunded because of the losses we made after relegation.
Well, let's hope we're not talking about underfunding with the new owners. Is there anything about the new owners at all that you were able to find in these accounts?
So in terms of these accounts, obviously these cut off at the end of June. The only thing that there are is what they disclosed in the accounts as what they call post-balance sheet events. So are things that have happened since that have an impact on the finances. Two things that really are worth noting there. One is probably the transfer business that we did this summer. So they were not reflected in these accounts, but the transfer business we did this summer showed that we made a profit on sales this summer of £22 million. So that was the sale of Jebbison, Asula, Bogle, and we even made money on Trusty and Traore, believe it or not. So again, coming back to that debt that I talked about before, we sort of cleared it with quite modest sales, and obviously the 𝗍𝗶𝗴 deal was. In terms of what we reinvested, we were in a position to reinvest, and in terms of transfer fees, excluding signing on fees for a couple of big free transfers in Callum and 𝗍𝗫, we spent £6.9 million in transfer fees on Harrison Burrows, Kiefer Moore, and the number one Cooper, and I think most people would say that was a significant bargain for those three players. So there was still an element of clearing the books, but not completely not being able to sign new players. The other point input that happened post balance sheet was obviously 23rd of December 2024. COH Sports United bought the club from Prince Abdullah and United World. They're a company based in Delaware, and it looks like there was a lot of talk about them being venture capitalists and doing this on behalf of a group of investors. It actually looks like that COA Sports Limited was owned by trusts of Stephen Rowson and 𝗲𝗵𝗶𝗹𝗹 personally. So it looks like they were personal investments rather than through their funds. But obviously we'll get a bit more of a clearer idea when Co Sports actually have to produce their accounts and when we produce our accounts for this season.
What's been your first impressions of the new ownership?
That's a good question, Hal. It's difficult at the moment to determine whether they're investing their own money or whether they're calling on future income, because obviously we're in a position at the moment where we're in the first year of parachutes and we have a second year of parachutes that we could easily be calling upon. And I don't necessarily think that's a criticism if that's what they are doing, because obviously they'll have made a significant investment to actually buy out the Prince, and they're clearly bringing new investors into the table as well. So it's difficult to say whether, for example, the Tom Cannon signing, which is clearly an ambitious signing for a championship club, was funded by them, by Future Parachutes, or maybe didn't involve much in terms of money up front. But certainly in terms of the ownership, I mean, the ownership's going to go smoothly while we're winning games, isn't it? And at the moment, Chris is making their life very, very easy. And I'd like to be on the positive side here and say that they're just sitting on their hands and letting him do the job. And I think that when we've seen a lot of owners and the way that they meddle, I think that's probably quite a good thing. I'm not a big fan of the two development signings. I mean, there was a lot of criticism of the likes of Slimani and Traore, but I mean, they're established names compared to the level that they've actually signed in this winter market with the two AI development signings. So I'm not a big fan on that, but hopefully that's just a bit of an experiment, and maybe Chris will get more involved in that when that shakes out.
They could both prove to be world beaters, so we'll have to maybe reserve judgment there. There's going to be talk, because there already is, with it being so tight, the race for promotion, the -2. There are still so many blades that bring it up all the time and are concerned that come the end of the season, 1 point or 2 points could actually be crucial. I don't want to get too much into the weeds on this, but there will be people watching that maybe don't know why Sheffield United had -2 deduction put on them this season. Are you able to give us kind of an abridged version of your understanding of why that happened?
Yeah, I mean, basically in the promotion season, so we were due to pay installments on transfer fees. We mentioned this earlier. We were due to pay installments on transfer fees around the January. Most installments are due in line with windows. So we were due to pay Liverpool for Brewster, Malmo for 𝗲𝗵𝗶𝗹𝗹, and various other transfers. Those debts, those football debts, are called priority debts. What the Football League don't want is for one club to default on their debts or slow pay on their debts. That means another club will start to struggle. So it's looked at quite strongly by the Football League that if you don't meet your football debts quite quickly, even if you renegotiate them, then they want to take action. From our point of view, we let that process go for too long. We didn't actually pay the debts that were due in the January until we got the income from the FA Cup semi-final, basically, which is obviously early spring. So we were obviously allowed to be promoted. We had a sanction, and our sanction actually was a transfer ban for 3 windows. So it would have been the sum of the 2 windows that we're talking about for these accounts, and the summer just gone. We would have not been able to make any signings other than loans or free transfers. Now, obviously, we escaped the first 2 windows of that by moving out of the Football League jurisdiction and going into the Premier League. So we sort of got away with it. And whether that's right or wrong is for other people to debate. So really, we only had an issue with this 1 window. And we had a choice, really. The Football League wanted to impose the embargo on us. So we weren't able to sign the likes of Burrows, Moore and Cooper. And we went to quite a lot of expense to try to changed that, and basically the thing that they settled on is, yes, the Football League would waive the embargo because we had a lot of players turning around, a lot of aging players, but we would have to take a -2 penalty, and if it was felt that that was as good, yeah. So fundamentally, it is bad management that we've got to a -2, but equally, probably to avoid -2 would have meant selling Sander Berge or 𝗚𝗏 𝗚𝗏𝗍 in the promotion season, and I think the fear is that you would have lost out on that £70 million uplift if you'd have sold one or two of those key players. So it was a calculated gamble, and we'll probably find out whether that calculated gamble has worked at the end of the season. But
and isn't that just football? Calculated gambles. And accountants, Sheffield United fan, Darren Smith, you know I struggle. So I really appreciate you explaining all of this in a way that if even I can understand, then hopefully more can as well. Thank you very much for going through those accounts on a season I'd rather largely forget, but I really do appreciate it. Thanks again.
No, my pleasure.